This is the Sony A6400, and in this video, we are going to be talking about why you should buy one in 2024. So the Sony A6400 came out in year 2019, and what excited me the most was that this camera can shoot 4K 25 frames per second with no overheating, no recording limit like with some Canon cameras, and with excellent autofocus. So that made me buy it as soon as I could when it was released here in Hong Kong. So the Sony A6400 paired with the 16 to 50mm kit lens weighs only about 519 grams, which makes it an excellent camera to travel with, or if you just want a camera to leave in your bag as an everyday camera. So not only is this camera lightweight, it is compact as well. If you can see, it's almost a perfect rectangle, and the viewfinder is tucked away all the way to the back right here, opposed to maybe an A7 IV right here. As you can see, the viewfinder, since is on the top right here, it's protruding on the top. So if you compare these two, just in terms of form factors, this is definitely going to be a lot smaller. Even though this is full frame, I'm just saying that the viewfinder does make a difference where it's placed. So aside from the viewfinder, this also has a built-in flash. So if you press this button over here, it pops up the flash right there. So it's not going to be as professional as, say, using an external speed light or maybe something that you control with a remote, but this does get the job done when you're in a pinch and the lighting isn't really perfect and you just want that little kiss of light. This is a good option just to save yourself if you are in need of light. So the second big reason why I think you should buy an A6400 in 2024 is that this is a true APS-C hybrid camera. So if you're looking for a camera that isn't so expensive but at the same time can be equally good in both photo and video, well, this camera is a good option because it ticks all of those three boxes. So the Sony A6400 has a 24.2 megapixel sensor, which makes it good for taking photos, and at the same time, if you do want to print out your photos, you can do that with this camera. So one more good thing about this camera is that it has a decent amount of high-speed burst. So if you're taking photos of something that is fast moving, like for example, like a car or skateboarders or anything that is moving fast, it has a decent amount in performance when it comes to high-speed burst. So this camera can shoot both in JPEG and RAW. So if you want more flexibility in post, like for example, if you want to edit your photos more, like color grade them, then shooting in RAW is a must. But if you are like me, who sometimes just wants to have like a plain old JPEG that you want to shoot properly in camera so you don't have to edit it too much in post, then just shoot JPEG. But then again, you can do both JPEG and RAW at the same time. But you have to remember that it will consume more SD card space in your camera. So aside from talking about the photo specs of this camera, let's talk about something that excites me more, which are the video capabilities of the Sony A6400. So this camera, like what I said in the beginning, can shoot 4K 25 frames per second with no overheating and good or excellent autofocus. And that excites me so much because back in 2019, I was still using a Canon M50. And at that time, I was really impressed by what it can do because it was the first camera that can shoot 4K. But the problem is, if you shoot 4K with the Canon M50, you lose the dual pixel autofocus, and at the same time, it adds another crop on top of the APS-C crop. So it's terrible, right? So this camera basically solves everything that the Canon M50 struggles with. So if slow motion is a requirement for you, then this camera is a good option as well because this camera can shoot 60 FPS up to 120 FPS in 1080 with autofocus and audio. So if you're looking for that creamy and smooth B-roll or slow motion, this camera is a good camera to do that with because the autofocus is still as sticky and still as good even if you're shooting in slow motion or in a higher frame rate. You know what I mean. So aside from the amazing 4K recording capabilities of the Sony A6400, there is also a mic jack, which means you are going to be able to plug in any 3.5mm microphone onto this camera, and you can put a microphone on top of the hot shoe. So one more thing that amazes me about the Sony A6400 is the amazing autofocus. So I've been using Canon back in 2012 all the way to 2019, and the autofocus was already good enough because when dual pixel came out around 2018 or 17, that was already good, right? But when the phase autofocus came out for the Sony systems, it was even better. So one more thing that this camera has is a flip screen, which is this one right here. If you look closely, I can flip it out like that. If I'm filming something from the front, I can just look at the screen like this. But if I'm vlogging, I can flip it up like this. and I can actually see myself. So having a flip screen is vital because you never know what you're going to be filming or photographing. And yeah, it's better to have one than not have one. So before we end the video, let's talk about some cons that I found with this camera. And the first one is the battery life. So this camera still uses the old batteries that are the NPF FW50 batteries, which are good but not good enough because I'm already used to using the Sony FZ100 batteries, and those ones just bring 3 and you're good for the whole day. But with this one, you run out super quickly. So yeah, this is just a nitpick, but if you are gonna buy this camera, make sure to buy more than 2 batteries just in case. So the second thing that I don't like about this camera is the lack of a headphone jack. So having a headphone jack is good because if you are recording professional video with professional audio, it's very important that you can monitor the audio. It's not really a deal breaker, but it would be nice to have it if somehow Sony was able to put it without making the body too big. But then again, I'm already happy. It's not gonna be a deal breaker for me. So the third thing I don't like about this camera is the micro HDMI port. So if you look closely, it still sports the old micro HDMI port right here. So a lot of cameras are now using the full-sized HDMI cables or the HDMI ports. So again, this doesn't bother me too much because having to have like a full-size HDMI port on this will make it bigger. So I'm gonna give it a pass just because I don't want it to be anything bigger than this. And last thing that I don't like about this camera is just the flip screen. So you can put a microphone, right? But the problem now is if you do pop up the screen like this, the microphone basically blocks the screen. So you're not gonna be able to see yourself. So for me, it's not really a problem because I'm just gonna be looking anyway through the microphone. But for some people, I can see that this can be a problem because they can't fully see what's in frame. But then again, all of the cons that I mentioned are not really deal breakers, but it's more like nitpicks because when it comes to cameras, I have a very strong opinion as to what I like and what I don't like. So the Sony A6400 is definitely a viable buy when it comes to purchasing a camera in 2024. So if you're looking for a camera that can do equally good in photo and video, then this camera is definitely one of the best cameras out there, especially if you consider the price. I don't exactly know how much this camera is right now, but one thing I do know is that this camera is going to be worth it whether you buy it brand new or better yet, buy it secondhand, because there's a lot of people upgrading to the A6700 right now, which means this camera is going to be a lot cheaper now. So that is it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you found this video helpful, leave it a like. Leave me a comment and feel free to ask any questions about this camera and I will be glad to reply to those said comments. So thank you guys so much for watching and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.